Hello, everybody. It's Friday. It's 12 o'clock, and it's Wow Ergonomics with myself and Stephen Howe. Stephen, how's your week been?
Good so far. Busy, clocking up the miles. So actually quite interesting, sort of getting out to see some end users with some of our reseller partners, Graham, which as a manufacturer is really interesting because we just sort of we make the product and we send it to our people who sell it. What's really interesting and something we're focusing on more as a business is actually engaging with the end user, the person who is ultimately using our product. And I think one or two other people in our sector, particularly around chairs, are trying to do similar things, try and get the message out to the end users a little bit more and engage with them. So it's actually interesting because we then get some direct feedback, what people like, what people don't, what would they like to see. So that's really interesting for us. So yeah, a little bit of that yesterday. I'm off out again today doing the same, and a little bit tomorrow. So it's certainly a sort of a shift in focus, Graham, for us is, yes, clearly working with our resellers, but trying to engage with those people who are ultimately using our product in their workplace.
You probably can't give the game away in terms of that kind of feedback, but because it's probably hush hush. But is it? Are some of the conversations surprising to you? Can I say that? Is it not purely around price or sort of how people get, how people can buy into this as a product? But is there, are there other conversations maybe around sort of sustainability or whatever? Are some of the things that end users bring up actually things that you've never thought about?
Yeah, it's interesting. There's probably a little bit of both, and I think it's worth sort of getting into it a little bit. So I think the first thing I would say as a manufacturer, when we are taken in by one of our reseller partners, what we clearly try and avoid is getting involved in things around pricing and commercials. We're not there to discuss that. What we're looking to do is talk about the product itself and what value it can bring. I think one of the really interesting things that I've seen a couple of times recently is lack of awareness of some of the things that actually exist in the marketplace. And that's where you go in and you have those discussions, and it makes you think you shouldn't assume that everyone knows everything that you do. So, for example, we went into a large NHS trust a few weeks ago with one of our reseller partners in the south of the UK, and just got talking around products and solutions and that sort of thing. And we then kicked out the discussion around document slopes or document holders, which isn't a new product. It's a product that's been around a long time. But it was interesting that the person we were speaking to, it wasn't a concept that they'd ever been familiar with. They didn't know that type of product existed. So they've seen lots of their colleagues, you'll have discussed this, Graham, numerous times, people sitting there with paper everywhere, twisting and turning in the desk, at the desk in the chair all day long, not realizing that such a product exists that sort of helps them work within the width of their shoulders in a straight line, but actually from a space saving perspective, sort of declutters the desk, not just using paper, but, things like putting their tablet there, putting their mobile phone there. And it was really interesting that when you sort of went into that, you would have a preconception that everyone would know everything, where actually what it highlighted was people have got generally a good base understanding, but actually products that have been around a long time, still certain businesses haven't been exposed to them. So it was a bit of a light bulb moment. It was like, oh, hang on, that's a really great idea. We didn't know that existed. We have lots of people who are, paper everywhere. And again, that sort of brings you back to the whole thing around the paperless office, which, yeah, I'm sure people are using less paper, but there are still functions and departments within businesses that use a lot of paper. So I think the interesting thing, going back to sort of the question would be, is from the learning for me is never assume. There are lots of people out there who have a good understanding, but there are still products that you've got that actually people aren't aware of. So always be talking about everything that you do.
Now, the salesman in me, whilst you were talking about that, was starting to do the maths.
Okay.
right?
Yeah.
Because I think this is the interesting thing on this as well, especially given the example that you've just given. Is let's start breaking it down in terms of figures, right? That the lack of understanding that there may be a solution like that there. Let's look at the impact that could potentially have, right? So say that, for example, everybody in that office at the moment has a 1200 wide desk, right? So if we talk about rectangular desks, everybody, they typically start at sort of 800 a meter, 1200, 1400, 1600, 1800. Okay.
Yeah.
There you go. That's shows that I used to do this for a living. So say someone in that office thinks, okay, people don't have enough space on their desk for said paperwork that they need to do, right? What we need to do when we next do a redesign is we need to go to a bigger desk, right? Now, typically, the difference in price, albeit slim, between say a 1400 desk or 1200 desk and a 1600 is probably about £20-30. All right.
Because the reality is on something like that, it's just the top that's changing and not necessarily the frame that's changing. On some of them.
Yeah, on some of them. Right.
Yeah.
So, but even then, it will be about £20 or £30 difference.
Oh,
right.
Absolutely.
Okay. So you have an office of 40 people. You've got 40 times £30, say, difference in terms of the cost that you're going to put into that office to upgrade to a larger desk. However, you're then taking up more floor space, right? So it may then mean that you can't fit as many people into that office as you did previously, which then means you might have to use other floor space in another office space.
Yeah.
Right. Now you're into rental space per square meter, right? Which could actually be thousands per month, right? Especially if this was like central London. So the point is here that not knowing about these solutions, the knock-on effect of that could potentially be quite a lot of extra money that the business needs to spend. And actually does it really solve the problem? Because if you give someone just a larger desk space, that all that's going to happen is that all they're going to do is spread out that paperwork over that desk space. And actually you exacerbate the problem because the twisting from one side of the desk to the other is going to be greater. So you think you're solving the problem, you're not. You're spending thousands of extra pounds and you still haven't solved the problem. And then what will happen is they'll find out about your solution and buy that as well.
Yeah. But I tell you what was really interesting though, because sometimes, again, looking at preconceptions versus reality, the preconception would be is if with a public sector body such as the NHS is, we're a medium to premium brand. We don't position ourselves. The space for everyone in the marketplace, but that's where we position ourselves. Your sort of first thought would be is this the right type of audience who wants to go and invest in a product that's got a lot of adjustability, has got a good sustainable story, etc., etc. And you go, well, actually, on face value, they're going to be looking at price. That's the preconception. The reality, when I got into then talking to them, was the most important driver for them was reducing absenteeism. So actually, whilst investing in a product would be sort of a capital expenditure up front, the reality is their biggest challenge in the NHS is actually sickness and absenteeism. So they see it as a very worthwhile investment, investing in good quality adjustable product, because actually if it means that individuals are having 1 or 2 less days off per year sick, that's of more value to them, and very quickly outweighs the additional investment they've got to do in products and solutions. So again, it's that, perception versus reality. You go, will we fit there? Actually, what's top on their agenda is getting people back into the workplace, reducing sickness, and driving, improving people's attendance at work. That was their main sort of driver. So again, that was quite an interesting piece that came from that conversation, that just getting involved and discussing things, that came to the forefront quite quickly.
So do you think, this is the $1 million question, literally the $1 million question. So do you think that actually over the years, too many people within the sector have been too focused in their own minds about price, as opposed to really having conversations with the end users about what they see as value, understanding their rationale in terms of their objectives, and actually then providing a proper value proposition based upon the evidence that they've got from the end user. I just wonder whether, it all comes back down to the same conversation that we've had over and over again about the fact that, people have stuck ergonomic in front of a product that's like as cheap as chips and said, well, it's an ergonomic product. But actually, if we got away from that and selling at that kind of level, but we actually found the pain points of the client, understood the issues, argued sensibly the value proposition, then if the product solves is a solution and solves the issue and therefore offers great value within that arena, then actually, does it matter what it costs? If it's still saving money, it's saving money.
Yeah, and I think it's an interesting point you raise. I would say possibly that's where too many conversations have gone, is around the cost, what's going to be on the invoice. There's lots and lots of good people in the sector who go out and talk around the benefits, but I think sometimes it can be very easy to get drawn into a conversation about price. Like I said at the start, as a manufacturer, when we go into an end user customer under invitation, it isn't our area to really get involved in sort of finite and direct and detailed commercials, but we talk about the product and we can give some indication. But as you say, if one product costs £100 and one costs £30, but the £100 product addresses the issue, then it's irrelevant that the comparison between 100 and 30 is then irrelevant, because if the 30 doesn't address the problem but the 100 does, then you go with the 100, because yes, okay, there's an initial investment, but actually it's addressing, it's curing, it's helping resolve that sort of issue. So I think the lesson for me, being in this sector for sort of 4.5 years, and it's something I've still always approached it that way, is talk about the benefits of the product. And we're too concerned that it's going to be maybe down to price. And yet ultimately, there has to be a commercial consideration. But I think the problem is we maybe fall into the trap of putting the commercial consideration too high up the list, rather than features, benefits, what's it going to deliver? Because if spending £50, or like the example before, £70 extra gets, Joe from accounting in 3 days extra a year, because whatever you've installed or you're delivering helps address those issues, it's worth it, isn't it? But as I say, it's maybe we've got things in the wrong order. Yes, we have to discuss commercials, but ultimately features and benefits, what's it going to deliver to the individual and to the organization?
Is it about, in a way, let's have this conversation to try and help anybody that's trying to have these conversations. Is it about, in the first place, not going in necessarily just to talk about product, but is it about trying to set up the meeting in the first place to listen and get getting the client to actually talk about what their problems are, because I think as soon as you get within any industry, as soon as you get the conversation around to nuts and bolts, here, this is what I sell, well, how much is it? You're into a conversation around price.
Yeah.
Whereas if you can have a conversation where you go, right, we've got no agenda around products because we don't know what your problems are.
Mm.
So we're not going to come in here and go, well, you need this, this, and this. Let's talk about the pricing and this, because we don't even know what you need yet. Let's talk about what your problems are, how together we might be able to solve those problems, and then ultimately come back to price. But then at that point, you understand the value. Again, it comes back to that. Then you understand the value of what that service, product, whatever does in order to answer that pain point.
It has to be driven by the customer, Graham, as you said, because ultimately, I could sit there in a meeting with a customer, an end user, and start banging on about certain things that we do. If that's absolutely no relevance to their business, you're wasting your time and you're wasting their time. You need to understand what the problems are from them. They need to be telling you what the challenges are. Then you need to be matching your solutions to that challenge to actually alleviate those issues. And it comes back to, you mentioned that it comes to that old sort of classic cost versus price, isn't it? Or there's different sort of there's different variations of that. But ultimately, what the price being what's on the invoice, the cost being actually what happens if you don't do something. That is the cost, isn't it? If you don't go and invest in a new set of trainers, or you don't go and invest in, this, that, on the other, that's the cost with it, versus the price as to what's the physical monetary expenditure. So it's weighing up those two, isn't it? It's understanding the difference between those two different things.
Now, you've talked there a little bit about the fact that the end of the process, if you like, for a client, which is that, but it's still quite responsive, which is that if they don't do this, then absenteeism is an issue. Mm. Are any of the clients talking about it from the other end, like the proactive end of actually, if we want to get talent in, we need to be doing certain things, because actually people are now looking at us and they are seeing our employee value proposition, our EVP. And if our EVP doesn't look right, then nobody's going to come and work here. Right. I mean, it's been a long thing with some of the big tech companies for ages, hasn't it? Which is that, people go, I absolutely want to go and work at Google or whatever. Look at their offices. Look at the way that they work. They've got almost like a shopping mall in the middle of the office.
Yeah. Fruit every day.
Fruit every day. I can go and have a back massage at work. It's what, are people beginning to look at that as well?
It's things that I've sort of anecdotally heard rather than sort of directly heard in front of meetings, but it is something that goes on. That if you think about it, there's a bit of a war for talent, as it were, out there, isn't there? There are certain sectors where there are a limited resource, and ultimately, if you want to make yourself, more attractive, let's put aside the pounds and pence that you're going to put on that top of that job offer. What are the working conditions like? How are you being looked after? Are you being sort of supported with your work? Is how you work productive, comfortable, enjoyable? So yeah, absolutely. I think it is things that people are recognizing, and certainly in sectors, and maybe the NHS is probably a bit of a good example, actually, because you've got the classic public sector NHS fighting against the private sector. And actually, they're sort of aware of that. How do they make sure that people get drawn towards them and not just going away from the public sector service and going into that sort of private sector arena? So I think it's something that those guys are certainly aware of. But it's things you are sort of picking up. And again, it's something that I think businesses are now becoming more aware to. And you've referenced before, haven't you, things like sort of younger CEOs and people like that are sort of the sort of people who are quite clued in and focused in on those sort of things. And I think as you do get more organizations who have slightly lower age demographic at the top of the business, those things will continue to be sort of very important and focused on. Ultimately, you will still come across businesses, Graham, where it's just not on their agenda, and we've touched on it before. The whole DSE thing that we won't get into today necessarily, being directives rather than law or guidance, still gives a bit of a. I always think a bit of a, with a monopoly analogy, a bit of a get out of jail free card, doesn't it, to some businesses who just don't see it as anything that's on their radar and should be something they should be considering or working towards.
Well, I was going to actually touch on that very quickly because a few weeks back we had a discussion where we talked about DSE as part of induction, and our guests were quite surprised that maybe it needs to be part of. It was the HR lady, but it was quite surprised that actually it needs to be part of induction, which I think it does, because I think and I was saying at the time that when somebody comes into your company, if you don't do if you like almost an audit of their health as they come into the company, how do you know whether their health has deteriorated or not whilst they've been working for you? Simple one, these eye tests.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
If you don't do an eye test with somebody as they join the company, how do you know whether their eyes are deteriorating over the period that they're working for you? And if they then turn around and say, well, actually, you've caused my eyes to deteriorate, you've got no proof, have you? You've literally, oh well, I stuck you in front of a computer 8 hours a day, and they're now saying, well, my eyes were perfect beforehand. So if that's the case, if we probably want more companies to check the health of their employees as they come in, is one of the things we could work on getting a change in the gift set that arrives when someone comes into the business, because I'm still really quite focused on that. I've seen a couple this week where people have got a bottle of wine and notepads, for goodness sake. Well, what good's a notepad these days? I mean, who even? I mean, these people who are in digital jobs, they probably never even use a notepad, right? I think it'd be great if we could get companies to go, right, at the beginning when you come in, here's your gift set, and here's like a laptop riser and a keyboard and a mouse or whatever. So, we're encouraging you, because we know that part of your work is hybrid and you'll work in various different positions. We're encouraging you to work right from the start.
I have seen, to be fair, one or two organisations do it, but I'd say they're in the minority, Graham. As you say, I made that sort of flippant comment before about bowls of fruit and packets of biscuits and things of fudge and all this sort of stuff. It is interesting that's what some people think a sort of welcome to. And of course it's nice. People like to get something, but actually, wouldn't it be really interesting if they got something that lasted them long term, and not maybe a bottle of wine that you have on the Friday night, comes to Saturday morning, it's gone. It's like, well, actually, you almost forget where that gift came from, don't you? Because by the time it's been consumed, if you give them something that's a little bit more long term, they sort of, it becomes part of their habit. They remember that, and they sort of reference it back on, oh, didn't Joe Bloggs PLC look after me really well? When I started, they gave me this, and this that I've carried on using for the last 3, 4, or 5 years, not the packet of biscuits or the bottle of wine that were consumed.
The bottle of wine and the biscuits and whatever are just going to get forgotten. They're temporary gains that are going to get forgotten. The thing is that if you do something about health and well-being, if you do like a gym membership pass for 6 months or whatever, if you do a laptop stand and keyboard, etc., if you do anything to do with somebody's health, right? that makes a statement about your business and what
Yeah.
your business is concerned about. And it's actually telling that individual that, you know, we worry about this stuff here. You know, we are concerned that,
Yeah.
you know, for you to do the best whilst you're here, you need to look after yourself. And that's the truth of the matter, isn't it, as well? You know, if we don't start encouraging people to look after themselves, they're not productive.
No. Hey, there's something we should do, Graham. Over the next month, we should have a little watch, maybe over LinkedIn, me and you,
I'm
and
writing it down.
let's almost, yeah, here we go, almost like a little tally. You know, almost the old 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 strike across it. Let's have a little tally up of people who we see on LinkedIn talking about new jobs, and let's see what they get. And maybe we need to have it a month. Maybe we should do something like run it for the rest of July and August. And then when we reconvene start of September, let's just see what it was. And it's a very sort of rough sort of straw poll, but it will be interesting to see what we actually see. You know, is there a change? Is there a change of the guard, or more companies go down that route? Or very much is it the wine and biscuits? Because as you say, those sort of things I think are very, like the product itself, it's a short-term hit, isn't it? It's a short-term sort of, you know, yeah, that made you feel good, but actually what we're looking for is medium to long-term people feeling the benefits of those sort of things. So we'll do that. We'll keep a little tally between us and see.
Well, and this is where we'd like to
like.
hear from you, the listener at home. So if you're watching this now, or you're catching up with this on Spotify, etc., do let us know if you yourself or somebody you know has recently changed job, and as a result of changing job, on entry, you were presented with a lovely gift of whatever it was. Do let us know what that gift set comprised of. Was it a box of chocolates and wine? You know, was it just a ruler with the company name on?
Yeah.
You know.
Also, Graham, though, if anyone's from the sort of the HR side of an organisation, what does your organisation do? That would be interesting as well. So not only what have you received, or something you've seen someone receive, but also what does your business do? What's your approach? And interesting, you know, it would be good to understand if someone does go down that wine and chocolate route that we're just talking about. It'd be interesting to understand why. You know, we're just kicking it around here between the two of us, but it might be interesting as to why do they feel that's the appropriate approach? Is there something that maybe we're not thinking about? So, as I say, we want to see the balanced argument. So, why do you go down that route, and maybe why do you not go down the route that we're sort of championing and promoting?
I'd like to encourage any of the trade that are out there that you know generally watch this on a regular basis. If you could actually share this, maybe with some potential clients, or maybe even with some of your client base. And what I'll do is when I upload this to Spotify, I'll do a poll on it as well, because you can add a poll to the Spotify episode. I'm going to ask people, do you do a DSE induction when somebody joins your company? It'd be really interesting and we'll share the results of that. But it'd be really interesting to find out, do people actually worry about the health and well-being of the staff as they come in? Are you setting your staff off on the right foot? What are you giving them? You know, are you giving them a bar of chocolate and a bottle of wine? What does that say to people? Without naming any names, I think I've told you this before, but
okay.
I remember arriving at a call centre once to start doing some workplace assessments, and this was on a call centre that was on an industrial estate where you couldn't really walk to it.
Yeah.
Right. So it was, you know, it was out of town, and they had a table at the end of each of these bench desks where all of these youngsters were working, laden with chocolate and alcohol. And that was an incentive to keep people working throughout the day. But I had to point out that given the fact that nobody could actually walk to work from there and that everybody brought their car to work, that's probably not a good idea.
Yeah.
You know, encouraging people to drink and then drive is not a great idea in the first place. But, you know, I wonder how many companies do that sort of thing. I mean, actually, here's a good thing. Even other companies that have had fairly robust health and well-being things in place, how many companies have I been into like that where the boss of a particular sector, you know, once a day, whatever, goes and buys donuts and puts them on the end of the desk and says, you know, help yourselves, folks.
Yeah.
Is that culture helpful, or is it actually should companies actually be getting a little bit more involved in it than that? Because the thing is, well, I'm going to be honest now. I'm having to lose weight at the moment. I'm losing weight at the moment. I'm on statins now.
Okay.
I'm on blood pressure tablets now, and actually, they think it might be genetic. I'm going to have to go for tests. Right.
Okay.
So it might be nothing to do with what I'm eating or whatever. And now I live off a diet of fish and salad.
Oh, wow.
Exciting stuff.
Yeah.
but the point is, you know, if you allow that sort of culture to happen within a business where it's you know it's treat everybody with junk food, treat everybody with, does it? It might seem like people are being kind and trying to motivate people, but actually, is that actually difficult for some people in that situation who may be needing to lose weight or maybe needing to be careful of their diet, and you know, and then feel excluded by it? You know,
that's really interesting. I was just thinking myself, you know, when someone's starting a company, you know, things like, you know, could that be someone who struggles with sort of diabetes? So any sort of sugared gift is inappropriate. I mean, is it someone who maybe has in the past had struggles with alcohol? You know, so sending them a bottle of wine might seem perfectly nice, but actually, are you sort of touching a nerve, as it were? Are you sort of bringing back issues that people have experienced? So again, sort of like you're saying there, Graham, you know, not just from people sort of having sort of issues in terms of their diet, but actually, is it sort of bringing back issues with past habits and addictions that people have had that are sort of being brought to the forefront? You know, because I can't imagine that someone would ask when someone joins, have you maybe had a drink problem in the past?
no,
but actually sending them a bottle of wine could be possibly the worst thing. So the worst way to start a new starter off is doing something like that.
Whereas actually, I think if you focus on well-being at all levels, whether it's physical well-being, mental well-being, whatever, and actually you're providing a service, something to accommodate that, then that's a great thing. That's really useful. Interestingly, last week and I might actually manage to get them on the show sometime as well.
Okay.
One of my clients who is in the recruitment sector, they have started partnering with someone that does an app around mental well-being.
Okay.
Now this is really interesting. They can introduce it to companies who they're servicing for full-time staff, etc. But what they're doing with it as well is, as a recruitment company, there's a number within the sectors that they're recruiting. There's a number of short-term employment contracts that they recruit into.
Okay.
And what they'd identified is that traditionally, anyone that's in those sectors, short-term contracts, because they don't yet fall under the auspice, if you like, of the companies that they're going to work for in terms of support. Quite often, you know, there's a higher rate of people not turning up for work or whatever because of things like mental health conditions or whatever. So they're going to support their candidates who are on short-term contracts with this offering. in order to help them with their mental well-being, in order to help them get to work. Now, I felt that was really interesting. Are we? That actually spoke quite powerfully to me, because it does show that if we shifted the focus around a lot of this, sort of airy-fairy support for people, or airy-fairy giving to people, and actually if we did all try and focus on how can we support people mentally and physically in all areas of their life, actually would we start to help a lot of people who couldn't perhaps get into work in the first place, or are on these short-term contracts, which could then end up being long-term employment or whatever. We know for a fact that actually a lot of NHS services are struggling.
Yeah.
Right. But there's not the help or support there. It's not anybody that's in that service's fault. The money's not there, etc. I'm having to wait now 103 days to get an appointment at Bristol.
And I just read something in the press this week that was talking about the weight the children are having. I don't know if you've seen this, Graham. It was on, I think it may even have been on Wednesday that this was out, so a couple of days ago. But there was a piece around children having to wait months to have teeth extracted under the NHS. So, again, this comes back to productivity, actually. This one child had a number of teeth that needed removed under, I think, a general anaesthetic, but was then having problems getting to sleep because the pain they're experiencing was worse at night. Therefore, the child's then going to school tired and not performing to the best of their ability. So again, it's some of the thing again, it's sort of slightly going on a different angle around productivity. But look at children, who ultimately will go into the workplace struggling with productivity because of delays and waits, as you say, from no individual's fault in that sector. Having a massive impact on them. So how a personal sort of issue, from a health perspective, is impacting productivity.
Yeah, I just wonder. This is a massive subject, but I just wonder whether businesses are aware enough of what's going on. I'm sure they are aware of it, but are they aware and changing what they do about the fact that we have got kind of a health crisis in the UK, and the fact that actually we don't have the support network and the structure that we used to have, and going forward, do more commercial businesses need to get more involved in terms of the health and well-being of their people? Because ultimately, if they're going to expect the NHS to pick people up and support them and get them back into work or whatever, it's not necessarily going to happen.
No, or certainly not going to happen quickly, is it?
No. So, again, I just think a whole shift towards, employee well-being, understand how can I help my employees be as fit and healthy, and who takes this is what it all comes back down to again and again, is who takes responsibility.
Yeah.
Who takes responsibility? Is it the responsibility of the individual? Partly, it should always be our own responsibility to try and educate ourselves and look after ourselves, But can we say it's the responsibility of the NHS or the government anymore to make sure that people are fit and healthy, or is it partly the responsibility of someone who's in your employ? And I
guess that'll vary. It'll vary, won't it, Graham? From business to business, sector to sector. Who in effect, who picks up the tab, as it were, isn't it? Is the thing. Are some businesses, we've spoken around things like DSE, and businesses are focused in on that. Is it the same demographic of businesses who will invest in looking after their staff's health, or will they just leave it for those people to sort it out for themselves? As you say, it's a big challenge. And again, is it something that's a differentiator where you go and work somewhere? Does the fact that your employer provide these additional services, does that draw you to the business? Have they recognized they need to provide these to draw the talent towards them?
Well, again, interestingly, a conversation with another recruitment specialist the other day. I'll quote their figures. I'll ask you the question, and I'll quote their figures. Okay. How many young Generation Z, if they are looking at a job somewhere, right? How many of them check that company's website for their not what the company do, but their values, and how their values are perpetuated down to their people? How many of them check that out on the website
for Generation Z?
Yeah, in percentage wise.
Oh, over 50?
87%.
Wow.
National survey done on it. 87%. So that means that, taking it back to that talent pool thing again, if you want top talent to come to your business, it's not necessarily just about money now. It's about the whole package. Yeah. What are you providing that person with that actually will support them in their life? And one of the key things in that was the ability to work flexibly. The Generation Z predominantly want to work in an office setting, which is interesting.
Okay. Yeah.
And I think the reason they do want to work in an office setting is because they want to learn from previous generations. They want to have that interaction. However, they want the option to be able to work at home.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So it'd
be interesting. It'd be really interesting, Graham. You mentioned that Generation Z, but if you took that back over previous generations and did the same thing, you do sort of think that the website, and I'm doing it the wrong way, whichever way, do you know what I mean? You would think it would drop the older you went back in the generation, wouldn't you? That 87, you'd be surprised if other generations potentially, whilst I think the figures would be higher than previously were, probably won't touch that sort of level, will they?
I think you have seen it change over the years when I've been involved in carrying out interviews with staff of different ages, etc. And I think, going back to my generation when we first hit work, etc., it was, and even the sort of rhetoric from one's parents, it was like, make sure you go and get a good job with lots of money.
Yeah.
Right. That's what was important, Yeah. No, you don't want to go. You don't want to do that at school because that's that's a dead end. What you want to do is this because this has got lots of money, right? It's like it was all about the money. It was all about the money, and actually you can still see it on things like social media in terms of what do some of the older generation place in terms of importance. Oh, look, I've got the new car, I've got that, I've got a new kitchen this week, it's all of that, etc. Whereas you are starting to see a generation that are going like, but what are we doing about the planet? What are we doing about mental health? What are we doing about what are we doing about inclusion and diversity? Right, those are very, very different agendas, very different aims. Not to say that some of those people aren't ambitious and don't want the other things, but the core of what they want is they want to be seen to be allied to or working for or doing stuff with people that are globally making a difference.
Yeah.
It wasn't like, I just follow my dad into this because, the family's always done it and it's fine. Doesn't matter that, they're robbing people to sell stuff. Doesn't matter. We're just makes a lot of money, but it's true, isn't it? There's a massive difference.
You touched on one of my bugbears there. People on LinkedIn who go on boat and showing their new car. It's just like, do they not get it? I just, maybe that's just me.
It's a car at the end of the day, isn't it?
At the end of the day, it gets you from A to B. If I suppose if that's what people want to do, that's what people want to do. But I think there'll be a lot more rolling eye emojis appearing against those sort of posts than maybe there have in the past. So.
Yeah. Well, in a minute, I'm going to go out and clean my McLaren. But
okay, You wish.
I wish. Yeah.
Don't we all?
Do you know what? I don't even have a car. This is the God's honest truth. I don't have a car. My wife has a car. I don't have a car. It's her car. It's not my car. Right? I couldn't give a flying monkeys about cars.
No.
And actually, I don't need one now. And it's better to walk. If you can.
Well, I was going to say, your walk to work is up the stairs. You can't exactly drive a car up your stairs, can you? So
Well, no, but I can walk to school. I can walk to. I can walk most places. I can catch a bus. In a few years' time, I'll be able to get my bus pass for free. That would be great, wouldn't
it? Let's not wish that round, Graham.
No, let's not. Listen, it's been a great chat as ever.
I enjoyed it. Thank you.
We were going to have a guest today. We didn't have a guest today. Our guest has sadly had to go and visit their father, who's ill, but hopefully they will be back with us. Yeah, and all the best. We wish them speedy recovery. That's never an easy time, but we will be back with a guest next week. If you'd like to guest on this show, we'd love to hear from you as well. If you've got something interesting to say, had a conversation first thing this morning with a potential guest for the future.
Great.
Somebody, here's a little teaser because he will come on. Somebody who's invented a bracelet that's being used in the care sector so that you scan the bracelet and it has all of your patient information, all of your medical information on it.
Wow. Okay.
Right? So you literally, with any phone, you literally put it next to this bracelet, gets all of the information, then you can pass that on to whoever it's relevant to. And that is saving lives. I thought that was a marvellous little invention that we need to look at.
We'll look at that, forward to that in future show.
Yeah, we will. Until next time, everybody, thanks for joining us today. If you've enjoyed this, please do share on all of the platforms. You can catch up on previous episodes, as usual, on wowergonomics.com. Have yourselves a healthy week, fit week. Look after yourselves. And if you're interested in maybe changing the way that you do induction within your business and maybe want to talk to one of us about what you could supply rather than the box of chocolates and the bottle of wine, do get in touch. Until next time, thanks, Stephen.
Bye.
Bye for now.